I'm going to get to the comments here in a minute. I'm going to start by addressing what I think is the biggest topic of conversation from the Cardinals' loss on Sunday night to the Dodgers, 5-4 in Los Angeles, and that's the John King moment. He gives up the home run to Max Muncy, and immediately I got a lot of Cardinals fans saying it's a travesty that John King's in this game. Ollie Marmol doesn't know how to manage a bullpen. That was sort of, I think, the way that people were feeling about that. And my thought initially was, well, it's Easter Sunday. Happy Easter, everybody, first of all. And I thought, I'm not in Los Angeles, so I'm not necessarily up to speed on everything that has been said publicly, that has been reported earlier in the day. It was one of those deals where we go to multiple families' house for Easter, and so I wasn't totally locked in, but I had the game on. I heard enough to hear Payante. That was a good one from Carl Ravitch. He's really into the Brendan Donovan thing. That's nice, too. I heard there was an Arenado, perhaps, was done to Arenado's last name. But like I said, I may not have been on top of everything, and I think it was Ben Cerruti that turned me on to it after I tweeted about this topic of conversation about the bullpen usage. And I said my assumption was that you didn't have the lefties, that Liberatore and Romero were going to be down today. I don't know if that had been said. Ben said yes, and also Helsley only available for one, I think it was. There were limitations on the bullpen, is what I'm trying to get to. And the move that happened earlier today was Riley O'Brien going to the injured list. They call up John King, and a lot of folks, even at that point earlier in the day, were saying, why John King? What about Nick Robertson? Why is this the bullpen move? John King didn't look too good in spring. And I think initially, when you just look at, when you make a move like that, yes, you have to make it for the days and weeks ahead because, you're probably not going to call up a pitcher one day and send him down the next. Maybe you do. Maybe in this case they will, and they're just not that worried about burning the John King, up, down, and just saying, hey, we'll do it. And maybe it's Robertson joining them in Los Angeles. Who knows? But I think part of the reason you do it that way is because of the lefty-heavy lineup for the Dodgers, and you're playing them Sunday night, and you probably also know that you're down two lefties, which it did end up being the case that Liberatore and Romero were down for the count today, weren't available to pitch. And so if you're saying why John King, give me anybody else. My question would be like, no, who specifically do you want? And I'm not saying that as I'm judging you as a fan. I'm not saying that as you're wrong. I think it's an interesting conversation because there are certain guys that are unavailable. And you might say, well, these games matter. You got to win them. No, I hear you. But Ollie Marmol has to also make decisions in the context of talking to his players and knowing who's got what on a given night. You don't want to necessarily betray a guy's trust and be like, yeah, you said before the game you were down and we weren't going to pitch you, but here you go. I'm calling you in. Like, there are just certain things that you got to do as a manager. And I understand that sometimes those sort of things can fly under the radar and we don't think about them as much on the exterior. But when certain guys are unavailable, certain guys are unavailable. And so I think that's why John King was in there tonight. First of all, why he was on the roster to begin with, and then certainly why he comes into that spot. But I don't particularly have a huge issue with John King coming in that spot. It's the moves that were made either earlier in the game today or even earlier in the series. And go ahead and get your questions in, your comments in. I'm going to just give a spiel about what I feel like is one of the main topics in terms of the decision that was made. So as Kenneth mentions right there in the comments, and I'm not sure how far behind the comments are in terms of when I'm seeing them, but Kenneth H. just put it up there. It flashed on my screen. The problem was that Ollie pulled Matz too early. We had a slim bullpen, so you have to live or die with Matz. That was the only thing. Like in the comments I was making to y'all back and forth on Twitter, I said, this is what I want to hear from Ollie Marmol postgame. I want to know what the conversation is about Stephen Matz and why you pull him after 81 pitches. Because, yes, he was getting into a little bit of trouble there in the sixth inning. He had given up a couple of doubles, but he's only at 81 pitches. You know that you're down for the count for about half of your bullpen tonight. And clearly there's the other half of the bullpen that you may not be down some guys, but you're feeling like you're in a spot where you don't want to use certain guys. Like we didn't see Ryan Fernandez all weekend. I think that's kind of a central part of the conversation tonight where he doesn't get into any of these games, and therefore everybody else is pinched a little bit more on what their availability sort of looks like. So Stephen Matz, though, as a starter, was one of those guys. And the commentary did come from Ollie Marmol after the game. I want to see if I can quickly find the tweet here that I saw from Jeff Jones, who covers the Cardinals for Belleville News, and he's out there in Los Angeles for this series. Ollie Marmol said after the game that it was an 80 pitch cap for Steven Matz today. Palante entering the day had 1 inning, volunteered for more. Helsley told the coaches he was available for the 9th and would have had it with a lead. So that was a case where Helsley doesn't have, I can come in and clean up the 8th and then do the 9th. That wasn't within his bag of tricks, according to Ryan Helsley, when he had the conversation with the coaching staff. I assume that would be before the game, or maybe that's something that happens during the game as you're leading into a situation where the 9th inning could be you. So they're just trying to get through that 8th inning with a lead. They were obviously unable to do it. And you could say, well, if that's the most important spot in the game, why is Ryan Helsley not getting that spot instead of John King? Sure, you could make that argument. Who pitches the 9th, though, if the case that as we know it is that we're not going to have Ryan Helsley for it? Then it's maybe John King for the 9th. That sometimes I think that is the best way to do it. Just work backwards, get through the situation that's the most difficult one at the moment, and then go from there. And if you're still in a position where you have a lead, be thankful that you do and pitch a lesser arm in the 9th and hope that you can get away with it versus there's runners on base. So, like, I could see that argument if you thought it should have been Helsley. Obviously, Helsley is not infallible either. Cardinals still may have lost this game. It was a case last night where Helsley comes in and did not end up getting the job done in the way that everybody had hoped, and so that's why the game goes to extra innings. But I think the Stephen Matz thing is answered in the way that Ollie answered it. He was on an 80-pitch cap, and I can understand there might be some frustration with that from Cardinals fans. I think the reason for that is, as we talked about on B-Shafe Daily all throughout the spring, which if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do. It's a button right there in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We're doing Cardinals live streams. We're doing Cardinals podcasts and videos all season long. We've been doing them all off season as well, but the frequency is obviously going to pick up now that we've got games going on every single day pretty much. So make sure you're subscribed. Also, if you have a Spotify account, I love getting more followers on Spotify. Just search B-Shafe Daily over there. Even if you prefer listening on YouTube, if you'd follow me over there, it would be super swell if you did that. I sound really cool saying the word swell. But the thing with Stephen Matz is we knew he was kind of behind all spring. They didn't want to really use that characterization. They kind of pushed back on it. The team, Ollie Marmol saying, I don't really like you saying behind. He's behind. It is what it is. And if you're in this first week of the season and he's got an 80-pitch cap, that is obviously that playing out in real time, that he was behind what everybody else was doing in terms of their ramp up in spring. It's unfortunate that it costs you in the way that it does. But if your argument was he shouldn't have pulled Matz as early as he did, that was my question too, and it was answered by the fact that the player had an 80-pitch cap. You can be mad about that, but that's not a decision that I think Ollie was going to veer from within the game, especially for a player who's got an injury history. The whole thing for the Cardinals and Stephen Matz is keep this guy healthy. That's what they're hoping to get from him. So that part of it was not an option. You had used up everything you could from Palante. He was starting to kind of fall off the path, and then you think about the lefties you didn't have, which would be JoJo and Liberatore. And you go to John King. I think it's why he was on the roster in the first place. Do I think he had a great spring? No. Did I think it was a confident moment to use John King? No, but I think they were kind of backed into the corner. But let's talk, and then I'll get into the comments. Why were they backed into a corner on this situation tonight in the bullpen? I think the bullpen management earlier in the series is where I would question it a little more so than moving to John King in the moment that they did tonight. You could go back to Friday's game. Cardinals were trailing 5-0, and Gio Gallegos gets into the game. Okay, it's a 5-0 game. You're in the middle of the late innings at that point. I don't know if 6th, 7th inning, whatever it was. And I believe he then gave up a home run. It's 6-0 now. That's usage where I would say, man, I get it. You lost the first game of the season and you're feeling crummy. You see the second one slipping away, but you can't necessarily just abandon your principles of the way you manage a bullpen and go to Gallegos, who's kind of one of your chief right-handed leverage relievers in a 5-0 deficit when you do have Ryan Fernadnez sitting there. And I understand maybe there's not a trust factor in Ryan Fernadnez when you're facing the Dodgers, and this series has to count because all of the weight of 2023 is weighing on this team, and you just don't want to live with the possibility of going down that quickly and getting swept by the Dodgers. Nobody likes it, but they were down 5-0. If this guy's on the team, that is a moment tailor-made for Ryan Fernadnez. It's not that it doesn't matter. It's not that you're throwing away the game, but you have to have some level of trust in these players and put them in a position at that point to say, hey, let's see what he got. Let's see what he's got. When I get to talking fast, my grammar goes. So that would have been something that I think should have happened probably on Friday night. Gio gives up a home run at 6-0. It's not looking great. Somebody has to pitch those innings, but you probably go with the lower leverage guys so that the rest of the weekend against the Dodgers, you are at as full of a strength as you possibly can be. Now, another element of this is you have Lance Lynn going on Saturday. The expectation for him is throw your 110 pitches, big boy, and get a 6 or 7 innings. I think in the mind of a managerial staff, that would be a moment where you would expect Lance Lynn to probably carry you a little bit more than your bullpen on Saturday. But the rain delay happens. He throws only 70 pitches. The rain delay was long enough that they weren't able to feel comfortable getting him back in there. I don't know if that was a case because I wasn't in L.A. I don't know if that was a case of Ollie Marmol telling Lynn, look, you're good. This is going to be a long delay, so don't even kind of stay in the mindset. Or if it was just a case of any delay at that point after he had labored through the first 2 innings, they weren't going to stretch him beyond that. Dodgers did bring Yamamoto back out after the delay for an inning. Cardinals elected not to do so with Lynn. He did have a really efficient 3rd and 4th, Lance Lynn did, but it just was the case that they weren't going to bring him back out. That also pinches your bullpen in a way that you probably don't expect when you're making those decisions to not only bring in Gallegos in that 5-0 game on Friday, but then after the Cardinals put together a bit of a rally, it's 6-3, and for the bottom of the 8th, you say, let's go JoJo Romero because we want to maybe see if we can't find our way back into this game. And I get that thought process. I don't think it's the case that they said, hey, let's go aggressive because we may not even play Saturday, so let's not worry about who we're using. Let's try and win this game and maybe set a tone early in the season after the way the first game went. Maybe you can salvage the second one and start to feel good about things. I don't necessarily think the weather played too much into that because that would just be a lot of gambling to do with a place that hasn't ever had rain delays in the last 9 years or whatever. By the way, how about the tarp thing last night? Absolutely hilarious for the Dodgers grounds crew staff. Not to poke too much fun, but wow, that was funny. So I wonder, though, with those decisions, right, Gio and Romero in particular, I think the Gio move is a little more puzzling because Fernandez, right-hander, can maybe get you a couple of innings and keep your bullpen better intact for Saturday, Sunday. But then once you felt like you were in a 3-run game, maybe that's why they say, hey, Romero, there's a lefty-heavy part of the lineup coming up. We're going to try to keep it there and maybe start a rally in the top of the 9th and win this thing. It's a long shot. It's not usually the way they plan their bullpen. You're down 3. Yeah, you want to try and make your best run at it, but it's not likely that you're going to come back and win the game. So a little bit puzzled by that, but then you end up needing Romero on Saturday, and so now he's pitched 2 days in a row. Libby throws 2 innings on Saturday, and you don't have the availability of either of those lefties against a lefty-heavy lineup, which I think leads to the John King decision over perhaps a Robertson. Again, I wasn't in L.A., so couldn't ask Ollie, couldn't ask Mo if he's there about those things, but that's sort of my speculation as to why that happened. But I look earlier in the series. I do. I look Friday and say, that's where you put the pinch on yourself by having those guys pitch Friday, and then suddenly you're a little bit more limited Saturday, Sunday. And Gio ended up coming in Saturday, and that was great, right? He ended up doing a great job. The man-for-man didn't score. Cardinals won the game in the 10th. But if he doesn't pitch on Friday, does he have maybe an inning in him? Does he have like a Kittredge did where he could at least finish an inning and not start the next one? Like, that could have been valuable in that 8th inning. If you even had a couple of outs from Gio, if you had 15 pitches from Gio, maybe you take a chance and you bring him into that spot in the 8th and try to get him through it, and then it's Helsley for the 9th with the lead. Like, those are the things that could have happened, and I think they didn't because of the way the bullpen was managed earlier in the series. Not necessarily John King, why are they bringing in John King? John King's who they had in that moment. That's kind of what I think about that situation. Let me know what you think, though, Cardinals fans. I'm going to take a sip from this cup, and it is the cup that you're thinking it is, but they don't pay me any money to talk about them, so I won't. But take a sip, and then I'm going to get right into the comments. I see the Grave of Einstein has given me some of his money to read his comments, so I'm going to do that first.